Call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. There are 4 items on today's agenda. We'll be discussing an item on crime reduction, an item about the proposed gun buyback concept. We'll be looking at a resolution authorizing the police department to pursue grant funding for sworn domestic violence police officers and officer positions. And there's a little bit of information on cell tower health and safety. Members of the committee, are there any items on the consent agenda that need to be pulled for discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Move.
Second.
It's been motioned and properly second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. Item G1, please.
Report on crime reduction.
Chief Roundtree, you'll be giving this report.
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening.
I was asked to provide a report on our comprehensive strategies being used in the police department to reduce crime, and also just to provide a general update on our crime in general, specifically gun crime. In your package, there is a 6-page comprehensive document. I know you don't want me to go through that whole document, so what I did, I prepared a PowerPoint that's also in your packet, and I'll be glad to go over it and just hit some of the highlights. I won't hit every slide, but I will go. Just as a start, we are committed to reducing crime, to make our city safe for all our residents so they can enjoy the city, they can enjoy their homes in peace without being bothered and a victim of crimes. Primarily what we use a focused deterrence-based strategy. That's a strategy that is used throughout the country, where we focus on the violent offenders and the offenders that are causing most of the issues in our community. What we try to do is we target a small number of chronic offenders. These small numbers are about 20% of chronic offenders are responsible for about 80% of the crime. And again, the focused deterrence strategies generally target this specific group. Mainly we target violent offenders and offenders who are involved in criminal activity, criminal enterprises, and criminal gang activity. We also have 5 approaches that we use to reduce crime. The first step is analyzing and planning. The first approach is analyzing and planning. That's where during our daily operations and during the course of normal analysis of a crime data, we develop appropriate plans to address any trends or any activities in what we call hot areas throughout the city. Also, in the identification process, we want to identify those responsible for committing those violent crimes and take the appropriate action to remove them from our city. In the investigation portion, we try to make sure that we properly document and we conduct thorough investigation of our cases to make sure that we put together a good case for our district attorney, and also to ensure that we have a conviction on the crime. And the 4th stage is to make sure that we provide our victims with assistance. Again, we do have a family services, domestic violence unit, and victim assistance unit where we offer services to the victim of crimes. And we want to make sure that we have the proper follow-through to make sure that once the crime is abated in a particular area, that it doesn't return. Just briefly, our Field Services Bureau, of course, that's the primary patrol division. Our captains daily review crime data where they develop plans. Those plans are then sent down to our lieutenants and sergeants and the officers that work in the respective beats across the city. Those plans are designed to be proactive so we can prevent other crimes before they occur. And this information is relayed to our patrol officers daily and our district street crimes units, who also supplement our patrol officers. In addition to our primary patrol, who patrols the city and operates in a big structure. We also have our Special Operations Division, who also supplement them, our gang unit, our SWAT unit, K-9s, traffic enforcement, park rangers, and our DWI task force. In the Investigative Services Bureau, there's two independent groups that operate in the Investigative Services Bureau, our Criminal Investigations Division and the Special Investigations Division. And both of these divisions employ strategies aimed at curtailing and stopping citywide violence, investigating serious crimes, and emphasizing in particular on gun violence. We do have one detective who's assigned in our Criminal Investigation Division to our Chronic Violent Offender Program and also our Violent Crimes Task Force. The Chronic Offender Program is actually a program that we work in conjunction with our district attorney here in Forsyth County, where the strategy brings together local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and federal law enforcement, where we look at the crimes. We meet twice a month when we look at the offenders who are causing most of the problems here in the city, and we try to get them we try to prosecute them to ensure that they receive the stiffest penalties. We also have a violent offender program where we also, this is also part of the same program where we review chronic offenders. Cases specifically dealing with firearms are reviewed during this process. And again, we try to determine whether they're going to seek federal prosecution, state prosecution, or both. We also have a Violent Crimes Task Force where we have one detective who's assigned to that program. This is a strategy that's part of the PSN in the Miller District of North Carolina, assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office, where we review violent offenders here in the city. These offenders are given a message by law enforcement partners across the district, where the offenders are called in. We have community involvement in this with our clergy, with our resource agencies, where we tell the offenders, we like to work with you. If you don't offend again, we will assist you in jobs, assist you in renewing your driver's license, assist you with daycare, or whatever other services that are available. In this criteria, the offenders are at least 17. They're convicted felons. They have 20 or more points that we use in this VCTF process, and they have been arrested by our firearms, and most of the time they are convicted felons that are out on parole or probation. In our Special Investigations Division, we have one detective that's assigned to the ATF Task Force, and his primary job is to review any gun cases here in the city of Winston-Salem. He is cross-sworn through the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, where he can bring offenders here in the city. They can be prosecuted federally. And this detective is responsible for seeing the case all the way through, whether it's through examining and testing the firearms, working with our federal officials, and also working with the U.S. Attorney's Office to make sure that the person receives the most prosecution and the stiffest penalties that we can offer. In our Support Services Bureau, as part of our overall strategy, we do have a crime analysis that review crime data daily. They devise solutions on crime problems. They assist officers in identifying and apprehending suspects and formulating crime prevention strategies and forecasting crimes. Just as part of our information sharing, we do have crime review meetings bi-monthly that consist of all components of the police department, so we can bring everyone together to discuss plans, to discuss individuals who are causing problems in the city, where we work on homicides, robberies, burglaries, serious assaults, auto break-ins, or any other high-profile cases. Also, the Forsyth County Crime Stoppers is run from the police department. It's housed in our Special Investigations Division, where we have one detective, where that's his primary responsibility. Crime Stoppers allows the community, as you know, to provide information. Also, the citizens, they will be eligible for a reward if their information leads to the arrest or the recovery of property. Also, part of the overall strategy, we have personnel that are assigned to federal task forces. We have one that's assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, the FBI Gang Safe Street Task Force, the FBI Homeland Security, Secret Service, ATF, and the United States Marshal Service. And what that does, that brings federal resources into the city to assist us, not only on a local level, but also from a federal level. Crime prevention and education. To better educate our citizens and help them to be better armed against crime, what we try to do is provide public education and crime prevention information. We organize neighborhood watch groups. We conduct residential and business surveys, and just organize various activities to promote citizens' cooperation in reducing crime in our city. Other initiatives that we have a street crimes unit. At one point, we only had 2. Most recently, we added 1 street crime unit to each patrol district. That's additional visibility and additional resources that we can provide to the citizens to help work on crime problems in specific areas. Our gang unit is out there, of course. We have a 10-person gang unit that help to work any gang-related crimes or any gang-related activity in the city. Of course, our school resource officer program, I'm sure you're aware of the value of that program, as you saw this summer, back in August with the school shooting that we had at one of the schools. We had a resource officer who was right there, who was able to stop things before they got worse than what they already were. Our Special Investigations Division, of course, and Criminal Intelligence. One thing that's very helpful is our enhanced forensic science program that we have. We have 2 employees who are actually certified to do ballistic testing. We have a major crime scene response unit and also enhanced fingerprint capabilities. And with that, we can solve crimes faster. We can connect crimes to different crime scenes and also different individuals a lot faster with these personnel. One of the things that we try to use too, and we will talk about a little bit later, is proposed gun buyback or either safe surrender type program to help reduce crime and gun violence in our city, and also public forums and educational sessions. One of the things that I wanted to touch on is our homicides for 2013. Of course, we did see a significant increase in our homicides. In 2012, of course, we had 8. In 2013, we have 15. And I'll be glad to walk down each one just to give you an idea of the causes that we've seen in these homicides. Our first homicide was on February 16, 2013. This was actually a nightclub shooting where shots were fired outside the club. One individual entered the club with a firearm, and the suspect was actually shot by a bouncer of the club. Our second homicide was on June the 24th, 2013. The motive behind this shooting was an ongoing disturbance between groups in a community. The victim actually went to the suspect's home on MacArthur Street, and the suspect actually fired a weapon at the victim, who was causing property damage to his home on MacArthur Street.
Excuse me, Chief. Excuse me,
Councilman
Mr. Chair. Could we get the ward that these were in? I know the first one is the southeast, but I'm not quite sure, after looking through some of these streets, what wards they're in. Could you provide that to us, please?
Yes, I have it now.
Thank you.
If you would like for me to give it to you as we go down.
Yes, please.
And while Chief is getting this information, members of the committee, members of the council, I know this is a lot to take in, but I think we owe it to the citizens to comb through this with a fine-tooth comb, understand exactly what's going on, and work on solutions as they arise. Chief, are you ready yet?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Going back up to the first one, that's the Southeast Ward, 3003 South Main Street. The second homicide, June 24th, 2013, is Southeast Ward. The third one, 3333 South Creek Parkway, that's actually at Forsyth Hospital. That was a murder-suicide where it was a domestic-related homicide, a couple involved in a long-term relationship, had children in common, and the male, in this case, he went into the hospital and shot his long-term girlfriend, and then he committed suicide. The fourth homicide, 800 block of Northwest Boulevard, that's the North Ward. Let me go back up to the third one. That was the Southwest Ward. The fourth one, 800 block of Northwest Boulevard. This was a club shooting where two groups, they just happened to meet up at the club at the same time. There were some past words and disputes over what we know from just meeting with suspects and conducting interviews, where it was ongoing disputes over drugs. They happened to be at the club at the same time. Two individuals were actually shot. One homicide, one person died. And again, that was the North Ward. The fifth homicide, 900 block of Cleveland Avenue. Two individuals were shot in a vehicle. One person died. Just based on our interviews, this case is still open. We do have a strong subject of interest. Charges just have not been solved at this time. That's the East Ward. The sixth homicide of the year, 2500 block of Ladera Crest Drive. That's the East Ward. This was an ongoing dispute over drugs between...
Chief, we believe that the Ladera Crest is in the Northeast Ward.
Yes.
It's probably a Freudian slip.
Yes, I'm sorry. Northeast Ward. Two individuals had been arguing. One subject's home had been broken into where drugs were stolen, and this was a retaliatory type shooting. The seventh homicide, 10-10-13, 700 block of Magnolia Street, Southwest Ward. In this case, the victim's son had been involved in a dispute with three individuals. They actually went to the home to retaliate against him, and they shot the victim. The eighth homicide, 10-30-13, 4040 Wright Street. That's actually the North Ward. We believe it to be drug related. Victim was shot at that residence. The ninth homicide, 1501 Longview Drive, Southeast Ward. Two individuals knew each other. One individual, where the victim had been loaning money to the suspect. The victim refused to provide additional money at the time of the homicide, and the victim was actually beaten to death in the home. The 10th homicide, 1113, 2013, 1001 Salem Lake Road. This was another murder-suicide, father and son situation. From what we know, it was disputes between the father and son because of the way the father was treating the mother. Don't know why they chose Winston Lake, but it was domestic related. The 11th homicide, 1122-13, was at 1403 East 21st Street. Homicide, this was a drink house shooting where there were, based on witness accounts, an earlier dispute occurred at the drink house. The suspect left, came back later, and shot the victim at the drink house.
May I ask a question?
Please do, Councilman Burke.
You have these drink houses and things like that happen. Do you let them continue to be drink houses? Or do you...
Well, no, we do what we can based on the law to work to close them down, and we work with our local ABC law enforcement and ALE to bring them to a close at that point.
In bringing them, are you really successful in bringing them to a close, or do they move to another place and start another one? What do you do?
Well, from what I've seen through history, sometimes they will relocate to a different location, and they'll start back up again. Some of the same owners, time and time again.
Maybe another time, Chief Roundtree. If the people with the drink houses, these people who have the drink houses, do you know, have a list of them?
I can provide that information to you as best as we know it at this time. A lot of times they are pretty much underground until something happens, and then we learn later that it's actually a functioning drink house. Normally these drink houses, they don't open up until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning after the nightclubs close, because a lot of times, you know, as soon as something happens, then we'll find out that it is a drink house.
Yes. I think
The 12th homicide, November the 28th, 1400 block of Fitch. Suspect was shot in his car. Based on what the information that we have, he was actually going to this area to a card house to play cards, and he was robbed at that point. The 13th homicide, 12/18/13, 975 Ziegler Road. Drug-related robbery. In this particular case, 2 individuals planned to meet at this location. They knew each other. They planned to meet at this location. One was going to deliver drugs to the other party. Once both of them reached Ziegler Road, the victim, the one who wound up being the victim, put a weapon out on the person who actually wound up being the shooter. He just shot him first, and he was killed at that point.
And Chief, while you're pausing, if you can give us the wards for number 11, 12, and 13.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's
11 is the east ward, 12 is the east, 13 is northeast. 14 is also northeast, 2300 block of Glen Avenue. Homicide, drug-related. Gentleman was actually killed in a house in I guess it's a garage apartment behind 2300 block of North Glen. For what we're learning now is that this place was known for drug sales where individuals congregate and sell drugs at this location. And the 15th homicide, 572 Allspaw Drive, North Ward. This was actually a domestic-related and a drug-related homicide. The gentleman who was killed, Mr. Williams, lived on Craft Drive. His longtime girlfriend and the mother of his children lived on Allspaw. Prior to the shooting on Allspaw, persons from the address on Allspaw went to the house on Craft Drive, and shots were fired in that house. At that point, Williams went to Allspaw Drive, and a person on Allspaw Drive shot his car as it was traveling on Allspaw. Three subjects were actually shot. One died. We do have a suspect in this case. We feel that he has fled this area.
And we still have an idea on where he may be.
Yes, we have an idea where he may be. We just haven't located him yet. This next slide, I'm not sure if it's in your book, but these are all the firearms that we seized over the last 3 years, just to give you an idea of the firearms that we've seized here in the city. They're broken down by evidence, found property, and safekeeping. Just for an example, in 2013, for evidence, we seized 302 pistols, 25 were found property, and 47 were for safekeeping, for a total of 374 pistols. Shotgun total was 40. Shotgun total was 50, and rifles 88, for a grand total of 584 weapons that were actually seized in 2013.
Chief, can I ask what that category safekeeping?
Safekeeping
Yes.
could be several things. If we arrive on a scene and just say there are children in the house and there's a weapon accessible, we could actually seize that weapon for safekeeping until a adult person comes in and claim that weapon. Or sometimes if a person is arrested for an offense in a vehicle, for example, and that gun is legally owned, the officers may take that weapon for safekeeping until that person can get the weapon back at a later date. Just to give you a little bit more information on the 2013 homicide summary and the motives, just for your information, 14 of the 15 homicides involved guns, 5 were drug-related, 3 domestic-related, 3 involved ongoing disputes between groups, 2 for robbery, and 2 unknown. Case status, 8 are currently open, 4 with strong suspects, where either we know who the person is or either they fled the city. 4 have been cleared by arrest, 2 closed death of offender, of course the murder-suicides, and 1 closed prosecution denied. That was the one at the very first one at the nightclub on Main Street. Homicide victim and suspect information. In 10 cases, the suspects were black male, average age about 25. The victims in 10 cases were black males, average age about 31. 3 cases involved white males and one Asian male. 2 cases involved white male victims, average age 42. 1 case involved black female. 2 cases involved, 2 victims involved black females. 1 case involved an unknown suspect, and 1 case involved a white female, age 44. The breakdown by wards, I won't read each one, but you see these for firearms. So there were 14 of the 15 were committed with firearms. Just a little perspective on our numbers. Of course, in Winston-Salem we had 15. Our sister city, Greensboro, had 28. Durham had 30. Charlotte had 52 for 2013. Homicide comparison by year. Again, 2013, 15. 2012, we had 8, which was a very, very good year. 2011, 15. 2010, 11. And in 2009, we had 16. Just a breakdown of our crime stats, 2012 versus 2013. As you see, of course, our murder homicide is up 87.5%, rape up 4.8%, robbery up 3.7%. Of course, those numbers are very small difference in those numbers. Aggravated assaults were down 11.4%. Total Part 1 crime, let me back up for a minute. The way crimes are categorized nationally, you have Part 1 violent crime, and you have Part 1 property crimes. The violent crimes, of course, are the rape, robberies, aggravated assaults. The property crimes deal with burglary, larceny, and motor vehicle theft. Again, for aggravated assaults, we're down 11.4%. Total Part 1 violent crime, we're down 5.9% compared to 2012. Part 1 property crime, we're down in every category. Burglary, we're down 13.3%. Larceny, 0.3%. And motor vehicle theft, 4.6%. Total Part 1 property crime, we're down 4.9%. And total Part 1 crime, violent and property crime, we're down 5% compared to 2012.
Chief, Councilmember Light is recognized.
Would you give definitions of robbery, burglary, and larceny?
A robbery would be like an armed robbery, for example. If I approach you with it doesn't necessarily have to be a firearm to be an armed robbery. It could be with a knife, it could be with a firearm, it could be with some other kind of weapon. but that's a robbery. A aggravated assault is any kind of assault, not necessarily, again, with a firearm. It could be with a brick by statute. It could be with a knife, where that's considered an aggravated assault. You know, if I strike you, if I stab you, or if I shoot you and you don't die, that's the aggravated assault. And what was your other question?
The burglary and larceny.
Okay, burglary in this category is for like a house break-in in this category. Larceny, of course, that could be anything like from someone goes to the mall and steals something, that's a larceny. If somebody steals your chair off of your front porch, that's a larceny. And of course, motor vehicle theft, but I think that's self-explanatory.
I probably use all of those interchangeably.
I'm going to use this to give you
Chief, I do have a question.
Councilmember McIntosh.
We had a breakdown or a comparison between Winston-Salem and other cities or peer cities in the murder category. Do we have that kind of a breakdown for violent crimes in total and property crimes?
I don't have that tonight, but I'll be glad to get your
Okay.
report.
Thank you.
This may be kind of hard to see, but I also wanted to give you a comparison between 2013 and 2011. Let's see if I have it. Let me just pass it out. You put it in read. Okay, you saw where we were 2013 compared to 2012. This also breaks down 2013 in the far right column, 2013 compared to 2011. We're down in every category with the exception of murder, and in that category we actually, there was no increase. We had 15 in 2011, 15 in 2013. But of course, the category of rape, 2013 compared to 2011, we're down 13.7%. Robbery, 2013 compared to 2011, we're down 1.1%. Aggravated assault, 13 compared to 2011, we're down 9.9%. Total Part 1 violent crime, 13 compared to 2011, we're down 7.6%. In the Part 1 property crimes category, 13 compared to 2011. Burglary, we're down 16.8%. Larceny, 1.4%. Motor vehicle theft, 6.7%. Total Part 1 property crime, we're down 6.8%. Total Part 1 property and violent crime, 13 compared to 2011, we're down 6.9%. Okay. That's all I have. If you have any questions.
Well, Chief, before we get into the questions, I just wanted to say that I believe that every member of this committee and this council wanted this information to come through so that we'd have an understanding and be able to explain to our citizens what it is that's going on. Everything that happens, you keep us abreast, so I want to thank you for that. I believe on the staff level, the department is doing everything that they can to ensure the safety of the people who we all represent. Legislatively, I think we're looking at, Councilman Burke, I thought you brought up an excellent point about the drug houses and the drink houses. And I think, you know, we had talked about, this committee had talked about looking at nuisance abatement with the direction of our city attorney to address some of those issues. And I guess from a grassroots level, we have a few things going on. I know, Chief, you'll talk about that a little bit later. Is there any members of the committee who have any questions? I saw your hand, Councilman Bessie, but I'll come to you after Councilman Blight.
And I just want to get our citizens to understand that these are small numbers. Therefore, making these minus 13% or plus, 5% really, if statistically, doesn't mean anything. I think if you calculated some of this with a standard, plus or minus standard deviation, you would find that there's really not any difference. So just be aware that murder being up 87% is statistically probably not significant. So.
That's a good point to bring up. And among major cities, it appears that we have the lowest homicide level out of all of the major cities in North Carolina. Councilmember Bessie.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I have several questions that are related.
Please ask away.
Thank you. Chief, first let me compliment you on the, I think, very enlightening breakdown of the analysis on the homicides. You've provided data over 5 years that shows that there does not appear to be a significant trend in overall numbers. You've provided comparative data with other cities indicating that we appear to be low, on the low side in Winston-Salem compared to comparable North Carolina cities. And you've given us, I think, a very useful breakdown of what's been involved. 14 of the 15 homicides last year were shootings. I think kind of explodes the concept that the street availability of guns is not a serious part of the problem, certainly in terms of lethality of the interaction. At least 12 and possibly all 15 of the homicides involved situations where the victim and the suspect were known to each other.
That's correct.
3 of the homicides were domestics. 5 were drug related. I think that we as council could learn more that would help us in supporting the most effective efforts if we expanded some of the statistical analysis. If we took it for some of the other Part 1 crimes to a longer trend period, a 10-year trend, and to see if we could break down further the statistics, particularly how many of the crimes and assaults and robberies involved use of firearms. Breaking down those categories further to the extent that we can get this information. I think it would be useful to know how many of those are domestics in the assault and how many are drug related. And cross-tabulate that information for the period so that we can see if we're identifying trends of rising or falling domestic violence, if we're seeing rising or falling impact of drug transactions in either the robberies or the assaults, so that we can help illuminate what policy programs we need to be supporting more of. And further to that end, if we could have some additional information in a different category, that is effective programs, best practices from other cities, things that appear to be helping in reducing violent crimes, and again, a look at by category, things that appear to be reducing domestic violence, things that appear to be reducing drug-related violent crimes, that kind of thing, so that we can be the most effective support for our police efforts and our other efforts in the community that are hopefully helping to address the underlying causes of the crimes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good points, Councilman Bessie. Chief, do you have any questions about the type of information that he's looking for?
No, I think I'm clear on what he's asking for.
Okay. And Councilman Bessie, I also think that'll help us when it's time to go to Washington, D.C. and lobby for funding, and we can come back and put that funding and implement it here in our community. Councilmember McIntosh. Okay, no problem. Councilmember Burke.
I was going to say, when you were talking about educating and communicating with the public to make them better understand what's going on, we do have the neighborhood watch crime people, and we also have the neighborhood association presidents, and I think they can appreciate hearing this kind of information, because sometimes people who don't quite understand what you are doing, they will say you're not doing anything. And I think when Councilman Light talked about the data, how you do, and also when the Councilmember Best talked about wrong range, let them see. Let them see, because a few leaders who consider themselves leaders in the community, sometimes they say a few things that's not even any sense to it, don't have their facts right, misunderstand and claim they're our leaders and we're not doing anything with public safety. So I think these are important things for us to say to these neighborhood groups. This is what we're doing. And we can show you. Now, we don't like to say we're unique because we have less crimes than some of the other cities, but I think we need to just spell it out to them. And then they will share it with others, and I think will help our city residents to feel a little more comfortable.
And I think it also prudent to say that everything cannot be done by our Winston-Salem Police Department.
Absolutely.
It takes communities working together, pulling together, and every community meeting we go to, we tell the citizens, if you see something that you don't like, call the police. It's their responsibility to come out and look at it. Anything suspicious, call the police. That's what they do. And we can't fix everything legislatively. But Chief, I wanted you to talk a little bit about what this committee is doing on the grassroots level. You talked about some of the community groups and community leaders getting together, and I know we had, this committee, we had planned more or less a ceasefire or a community forum to talk about what we can do as a neighborhood and as a community to address these types of problems.
Well, I know staff is working with marketing and communications to actually hold a community forum on February the 1st. The plans are, it will be February 1st, 5:30 to 7:30 on the campus of Winston-Salem State University at the Anderson Center. That way the community can come in and they can talk about some of the issues, talk about solutions, and just have a holistic approach where we can help address this problem. Because as you mentioned, it's not something that we can arrest our way out of. It's sad that some people choose to settle their differences with a firearm, so I think it will be positive.
And one of the things that will be unique, hopefully, about this event is we won't just have clergy and members of the community who walk around every day in suits and ties. We want to have folks on the grassroots level from all different faiths and walks of life coming together to talk about their problems. So I think there'll be some people from the reentry sector of the community. There'll be people from all over the city. So please, if you can come out and support this event, please feel free to do so. But again, we can't legislate everything. We can't arrest our way out of this. It takes communities pulling together. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Chief. I just want to reiterate, again, we appreciate everything that you and your staff and our emergency responders in our community. I always tell people that, and sometimes people don't want to hear this, but when I'm at my barber shop and they want to badmouth my police, I tell them it's the police and the fire and the other emergency responders that are between us and people that somehow just, they either had a bad day or they just don't want to cooperate. See, I try to put a positive spin on it too.
Thank you.
The data, as Councilmember Light said, I think we might want to, is this the standard, how we calculate the percentages or the change in our crime numbers? Because I'm like her, if I was in a business and I looked at this, I'd be like, I don't want to live there. So I would think that maybe we might want to show this, if this is the standard, but it's got to be another one out there, whether we use statistical data, as she was saying, to show the deviation, because that number wouldn't look like that. And to see 87.5, that would scare me even. I'm like, wow, that's a lot. But when you look at it in a different light, so I think we need to keep in mind sometimes we might need to change the way we look at our data. Again, on the community forum, I think we need to make sure with marketing that we get a flyer or an email to the churches, I think, and we need to do that like ASAP, so at least they can start announcing it in their announcements. I also think we need to post something at our parks, recreation buildings, particularly the recreation centers, because a lot of our young people do go there to play ball, and our seniors and folks, a lot of them have their community meetings there. So I'm hoping that we can even get it on the regular news, that we're doing this. And Chief, this is where you step up your marketing or whatever, that you get on camera and you tell them we want them to be there because we need their input as to how they feel. And I commend this committee for going ahead and putting that together. I think it's very important that even when I was with the Housing Authority for several years, the way we were able to diminish the crime in public housing was we started to have forums in each of the housing developments, and we got the neighborhoods involved along with the community-oriented policing, and we were able to bring that number down. Councilmember Taylor, I am hoping that we can see something, we will see something positive out of this. Again, our community will see that we are moving forward as a group, that we're all in this together. I just hate the fact that when I look at the numbers, it looks like black-on-black crime. Again, I know your committee will be reaching out to those organizations to help educate them. We need them, like you said. And when I look at the wards that are seeing the substantial numbers, again, it is the black urban communities. So, you know, we just need to keep that in mind, that we can't do 14 like we did 13. We got to help our folks.
Councilmember Bessie?
Thank you. Just a couple other comments. I was asking questions particularly focused on the violent crimes because I don't feel like we understand the trends there as well yet. And I know that we as council members over the past year or so have been hearing more about the violent crimes because, you know, quite frankly, the communication system has improved. We've been getting real-time information on crime by crime. And it has resulted in my perception that there's a lot more. And I think that's probably a misperception, which does not make the situation any less in need of attention. It just means that we need a better understanding of what the actual trends are a long time and what the causes are of what we're seeing, so that we can, you know, craft a solution to meet the problem. When I've been dealing with my constituents and my neighborhoods, my neighborhood groups over the past decade, in a number of neighborhoods, there's been a trend toward better and more active communication system, which is a good thing, but it also has resulted in some cases in a misperception that house break-ins have increased. Because they're hearing more about them, and it's bouncing around with social media.
Yeah.
And I've been able to take the data and so actually they're trending down. And part of it is because there's better communication, and there are more people calling the police and reporting suspicious activities, and so things are being headed off. But that sort of relates an understanding of what's actually happening to the solutions. We know in burglaries and larcenies in our neighborhoods that it works to have more neighborhood crime watch activity and more neighbors watching out and reporting the suspicious characters and suspicious activities, because that's the only way that the police know in time to catch them. You simply cannot have enough police patrols to be on every block, every minute. So the interaction between the active citizens and effective police work is what makes it work. I think we need to improve our understanding of how we do the same thing with violent crimes, with the robberies, so that we can be an effective part of the solution there.
And several keywords you used all ring back to me to say solutions, and that transitions us into item number 2. And I know, Chief, you're giving that. And before we do that, and while you're getting settled up, Councilmember Adams, I will say that this community event that we're planning is not being hosted or sponsored in any way by the police department.
I know.
And they will be there to keep the peace.
I know.
But we have to keep in mind there is a certain sector of the community that, whether we agree with it or not, they have a mistrust of the police. And what we want to do is build that trust and let them know that whoever wants to attend this event, please do not come because you think this is a police event. This is a community and a neighborhood event,
Right.
and this is a grassroots event. So I don't think you implied that, but I wanted to make sure that I did fix that before we move forward. Item number 2, please.
Report on proposed gun buyback concept.
Okay. I was asked to also bring forth some historical data on our past gun buyback. In 1994 and 1995, the police department conducted about 5 gun buybacks. The first one, we had $4,000 that was raised through a radio station, and we collected 86 guns at that particular buyback. We actually ran out of money within a very short period of time. During the course of the next couple of years, we had a campaign where we raised about $20,000 to conduct 3 additional gun buybacks, and those were very successful. Total number of firearms that we purchased was 549 guns during that time frame. On the latest version, of course, a few months ago, I provided a report, and at that point it was further discussion was requested. In the latest version, I have a second option for council to consider. The proposed gun buyback would operate in the same manner, with the exception of limited information will be gathered from people bringing in firearms. Of course, the payment scale remained the same. $150 will be paid for an assault weapon, $100 for a handgun, and $75 for a shotgun. As a second option, what has been done successfully across the state and across the country is doing a gun surrender type program. That way, individuals with firearms in their homes, if they just don't want them anymore, they just don't want to be around them, they could actually bring those firearms in and surrender the firearms. I have secured 2 locations from churches in our community. One church is the Alpha and Omega Church, and the second location is First Walltown Baptist Church, that has agreed to allow us to use their facility, whether we choose to do a safe surrender type program or a full-blown gun buyback program.
Well, I can say, Chief, before I take questions, I am more inclined to look at a gun buyback program as opposed to a gun surrender. I mean, there are critics to say that, gun buyback programs do not work. And you've given us a report that says that guns do come off the street. And some guns that are put on the streets are put on the streets by people who don't want them. They're stolen. For whatever reason, they're left in the car. And I know we've had this discussion. And people who commit crimes get these guns and do whatever with them on the streets. So if people don't want them, I'd rather have them off the streets. But I'd be willing to hear from those people at the table. Do we want to look at the safe surrender program, or do we want to look at the gun buyback program? Councilmember Light.
Thank you. First, one question about the prices that we are suggesting to pay for these weapons. I mean, could I turn in an assault weapon and get $150 and turn around and go buy one for the same amount?
Absolutely not.
No, not for that.
No?
No, ma'am. Absolutely not.
Or $75 for a shotgun? No. Okay. All right. So,
But he's the expert, so I'm going to let him speak. But I know for a fact that you can't do that.
No, you
but
can't. I would say no, not for an assault weapon. Normally, those are going to run you at least in the range of $1,000. So the $150 would not give you enough to purchase.
Okay. So this really is just a nominal incentive.
It is.
Okay. And I mean, I like the idea of trying to do both, really. The safe surrender, maybe that is something that would work too. So And you say it's got a reasonably good track record.
It does, and plus, the way I look at it is that if we can get one weapon off the street where it's not going to be used against a young person, it's not going to be used against a police officer, or even one of the critics of the program, I think it's going to be better than having those weapons stolen and then used against someone else.
And also, maybe having children in the house not be able to get hold of, weapons. So I see both as positives.
Are you finished, Councilmember Light? Councilmember McIntosh?
What happens to these guns after we buy them back?
Based on our legal staff, there was a change in the law. Now, these guns does not fit the criteria for the new law change. The new law change specifically addresses guns that are unclaimed, guns that are found, and guns that are kept by the police department for evidence. And we do have the legal team here, so anything additional, I'll refer to them.
So
but that's what the statute specifically addresses. So if I choose to turn my weapon in, my own personal weapon, it does not fall in that category based on our legal interpretations.
And so these guns that we are buying, not the voluntary ones that are turned in, will these guns be destroyed?
Those guns can be destroyed unless we find out that they are actually stolen and belong to someone else. So we would have to turn those back into the rightful owner, or if they are or connected to a crime, we would have to keep those for evidence.
Councilmember Light?
Yeah, I'm confused now. What is the new law? What does it say? And
the actual law that Chief Roundtree is referring to pertains to guns that were seized as trial evidence and guns that are unclaimed.
Okay.
And so the guns we're talking about don't fit the category. But if they were to fit the category, then we would have to dispose of them by some other means other than basically destroying them. But since the guns we're talking about don't fall into either one of those categories, we in fact can destroy them.
okay, so you can destroy those, but obviously not ones that are needed in a case.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And I think our citizens ultimately want to know, what are we doing about gun violence in our city? We can't regulate it nationally or on the state level, but we can do what we can do as a city. And I think both, I like the idea. It sounds like the general consensus is starting to be that the committee wants to look at both. And I think it would be a tool within our police department's tool belt to get some of these guns off the streets. Councilmember Bessie?
Yeah, I support giving the buyback program a try. I think, among other things, it gives us a public educational opportunity. One of the things that we've seen from the homicide statistical analysis that I suspect we'll also see from some of the robbery and assault information is that you're not safer on the street with a gun. That most of these crimes that we have analyzed, the homicides, involve people who were known to each other and situations in which a gun probably escalated it from a lesser crime to a killing. And we have the opportunity to get the message out to impressionable younger folks that this is not going to enhance their safety. It's not going to enhance their circumstances on the street and in the community to be packing. So this is, I think, a good opportunity for us.
All right, and judging from the nods, it appears that the general consensus is to move forward. Now, this is an informational item. I'm going to look to our city manager to tell us where this item is in committee or on its way to the full council.
When we came in November, we actually brought a proposed budget ordinance for $10,000 from the general fund that would be matched with raising money from private sources. That's still being held. I guess this committee could ask to send it forward to full council, or we could wait and talk to finance committee next month. Because you need that budget amendment to actually have the funds to actually do the buyback.
If I'm not mistaken, this committee did vote to move it forward in November. Is that correct, Mr. Manager, or can we get some clarity on that? I believe we did vote to move that forward, and it was held at the committee level and then sent back to committee for discussion.
Right, I think that was what happened, it was sent back. So we
Councilmember McIntosh.
Is there a timing issue with this? Will it be more effective at a certain time of year if we're putting money in people's pockets prior to Christmas to go buy Christmas presents? Are we going to get more guns back? I mean, I'm kind of making that up, but nationally, do we have any sort of...
Well, we thought about that too. If we could have done it before the holiday season, we may have gotten a few more, but it probably will not make that big of a difference if we choose to go this route. Of course, with the safe surrender, it won't cost us anything to do that one.
Well, and maybe we can look at Valentine's Day and promote love and not war. Councilmember Bessie.
Let me ask, in terms of the procedure, it went through finance and public safety in November, correct?
That is, according to my knowledge. Unless anybody else wants to correct that, that's where we are.
And my recollection, subject to being corrected, is that it was re-referred to committee, and it was re-referred specifically to public safety. So I think in that case,
so I guess you could send it back because the full council,
the public safety committee could choose to say, okay, we've looked at it and we think that we've had an opportunity to discuss the questions that were raised. I'm not on the committee, but
Well, I think that's where we are, and it's the opinion of the chair that a motion can be made to move back forward to the full council for consideration, and I would entertain a motion at this time. It's been motioned.
Second.
Properly second. All in favor? Aye. And there's none opposed, and this moves forward to the city council for consideration. Thank you, Chief. Item G3, please.
Resolution authorizing Winston-Salem Police Department to pursue grant funding for 2 sworn domestic violence officer positions.
Chief, you're on the hot seat today.
I am.
All right,
Okay.
Chief Roundtree is recognized.
As we discussed in Finance Committee meeting, we want to seek approval to apply for a domestic violence grant. In this grant, it would fund 2 sworn police positions along with necessary equipment. Of course, 3 of our 15 homicides from 2013 were domestic related. With the addition of these 2 detectives, we feel that we can increase our clearance rate for domestic violence related crime. Presently, we do have a family services division with 2 non-sworn employees where they provide information to victims of domestic violence and also just general victim services information. But with the addition of these 2 sworn detectives, we think that we can investigate our domestic violence related cases a lot more thoroughly and have a better clearance rate. Last year, we investigated about 5,175 domestic related incidents.
Well, members of the committee, our chief has told us that there is a need. The statistics may show that that is a possibility. I recognize Councilman Blight
Thank
for
you.
discussion.
One other thing that I've been puzzling about this, because I hear from a close source that part of the problem with domestic violence crimes is that it's much harder to get someone thrown in jail because the victim backs out or there's not enough evidence to whatever. So I think this might be a right step in the right direction for that.
Councilman McIntosh.
Seeing as the discussion we had on finance about this in 2 years or 3 years will become a decision that we'll have to make about whether we want to continue to fund it. How do we find out, how do we judge whether this has been a success? Do we have metrics? Do we have any kind of a process to evaluate it on other than just we think it worked?
Well, yeah, and we're talking roughly $170,000, and I think that's an excellent question, Councilman McIntosh. Chief Roundtree, do you want to address that, please?
One of the measures that we can use is recidivism. Sometimes you have chronic domestic violence offenders where it's time and time and time again. We respond to the same house, we arrest the same person. So that would be one of the measures, and then just to see how our overall domestic violence cases are reduced.
So would you like to see some type of metric developed other than what has been spoken today before we move forward with consideration? Or what are your thoughts?
I would like to see some plan for how we consider this a success before we spend the money. Is the money going away at a certain point? Do we have time to talk about this for a longer period of time before it disappears? Or
Well, and I wasn't in finance around that time. We do not have to, I'm looking at the vice finance chair, we do not have to continue this after 2 or 3 years, but please.
No, I was going to defer to the city manager as to how this grant, how it works.
There are 2 grants, but Chairman Taylor, my understanding is that this is just the resolution giving us, authorizing us to pursue the funding. If we, and as part of that grant application, and Chief can speak to this more than I can for either one of them, both grants, we have to put those metrics in there of how we're going to justify what we did and how it affects domestic violence. But if we are successful in being awarded the grant, it has to come back to this council to approve it. You can turn it down. And at that point, we could show you all that detail. But I believe the deadline is such that Chief really needs some authority this month, I believe.
Yeah.
Right, both grants are opening up at the end of this month. One grant is from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Violence on Women, and one grant is from the Governor's Crime Commission.
Okay, Councilmember Bessie?
Yeah, I just was going to suggest that the committee could request that the department develop statistics on the clearance rate for domestic crimes and the conviction rate, particularly. That would give you an indication of how effective the additional evidentiary development was being in getting the cases concluded successfully. You know, the latest information that I recall hearing about domestic violence victims is that on average they leave a situation 7 or 8 times before they get out of it. And all sorts of factors can go into whether that number goes up or down, including what kind of support is available from the community, what kind of support is available for the victim in seeing the case through, the kind of the Safe on 7 kind of coordination that we've supported for years now. And I would suspect that one of the elements is when the charges are contested, how successful are we in developing and using the evidence to prove the crime, and having that available to encourage victims to follow through, could be significant.
Councilmember Burke?
We had once the victim's assistant, an employee. Do we still have that person?
Right, we have 2 victim assistance coordinators. They're working our Family Services Division.
When it first got started, I know Miss Ernestine Wilson used to be the council person. She received the job to work with that department. But down on Kentucky, where they had the Baptist home, do they still have those women stand down there?
Yes, they do.
I see some of them still walking with their little children.
Right, that's actually part of Family Services.
Okay. But a lady used to direct that program, would come here and ask for, what was that agency, would ask us for some assistance, and we gave her less than we did anybody else, it seemed like.
It may have been Safe on 7 or
Could have been the Battered Women's Show.
some branch of the
Battered Women's Show.
That's what. And we gave less to, and these were women who were victims of violence through home situations.
Councilmember Adams?
Councilmember Taylor, the Finance Committee approved this with the understanding that we need to apply for this grant. Again, we have the option to turn it down, but the city manager and his staff will always, they will be again looking forward on the financials of what we could look like in another couple of years to sustain these positions, with 3 of the homicides this past 2013 being domestic related, and with over 5,000 cases. Like I said, I can't see anything but the good of the community. I just can't. And they're also going to be working with all of these agencies that every day they work with domestic violence victims and things like that. So I think it's a good thing, and they're going to help to educate the other law enforcement agents, participants about domestic violence that don't know that it's more than just when you show up at the house. There's some other things that could come into play, children, violence against the police, and things like that. So I support it.
Well, members of the committee, this item has been approved by Finance. The proposition, as I understand it, is to give the chief permission to pursue funding, and that hopefully the funding is obtained, and at that time the funding will come back to this committee and to Finance for consideration. I would entertain a motion at this time.
Move for approval.
It's been motioned. Properly second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
There is none opposed. Thank you, Chief. All right, now Chief Roundtree is off the hot seat. And item G4.
Information on cell tower health and safety.
All right, Mr. Sarin. And as Mr. Sarin makes his way up front, you can sit here or you can go anywhere you want to, Mr. Sarin. Please have a seat. The Community Development Committee, I'm looking at the chairperson, the chairwoman, is reviewing cell towers in residential neighborhoods, and I know they will be discussing that on tomorrow. What I wanted to do is have staff come to us and give us a chance to have some discussion about safety. Now, legally, I don't think that we can approve or disapprove the cell towers in residential neighborhoods based on safety, which is bizarre to several of us. But we did want to leave no stone unturned and find out as much as we possibly can about these cell towers. So Mr. Sarin is recognized.
Thank you, Councilmember Taylor, and good evening. Some of you may not know who I am. I'm Tom Sarin. I'm an IS supervisor and work directly for Dennis Newman. I'm responsible for the city's telephone assets as well as our wireless devices and to a small extent the public safety radio system. My background is I have technical background for BS in mathematics, and I spent 12 years in the Marine Corps as a communication electronics officer, went to school, a couple schools there, and then 25 years of experience here at the city. So I was asked to do this report, and I was asked to keep it to 2 pages. And what I found out was there's a lot of information out on the web on this. So what I concentrated on is this, is some websites that I went to that I thought would be the most reputable to most people as they saw it. There's plenty of other information out there that I did not document in any of this report that's readily available out on the web. Some of it may even contradict the findings that the report that I found through the organizations, the websites that I review, which is there is no health hazard or safety hazard from cellular towers at this point, as we know it. Let me start off by addressing what really what the issue is, and I'm not going to do it in technical terms, but electromagnetic energy is emitted from all wireless devices. And there is always a concern about what the impact is on the human body on electromagnetic energy. So these organizations I went to, I started off with the Federal Communications Commission. Their role in all of this is making sure that all electronic devices are safe for the public's use. And one of the things I discovered was that, to my surprise, that it's not all electrical engineers that work for the FCC. They bring in other staff and other resources that look at the biology of the human body and the impact of the RF energy on the human. So what they do is they work together with multiple groups to come up with standards to say this is safe use for all of these products, whatever they are that might emit an RF energy. So the FCC concluded, too, that based on our findings is that cellular towers do not pose a threat. The second organization I looked at was, it's kind of surprising, but the FCC actually had a link to it, was the Federal Drug Administration. The FDA gets involved in regulating products once they present a risk to humans. At this point, they're not doing any research towards cellular towers or cellular phones, for that matter, because they don't pose a health risk, at least to their knowledge. But they did have some information. There's a link in the report that you wanted to go see that they talk a little bit about cellular telephones in general. Another organization, since the real risk seems to be cancer, that a lot of people are concerned about, or tumors in general, went to the American Cancer Society. And the American Cancer Society took information that came from the Federal Communication Commission and other organizations and examined it from a biological viewpoint. They wanted to see, is there enough energy being emitted by these devices to alter the molecular makeup of the body to pose a health risk? They, based on their website and on their findings, there was no risk at this time. The last organization I went to was the World Health Organization, and the reason why I was interested in that was I wanted to go outside of the United States and see what the rest of the world was thinking about this. This is not just a concern in Winston-Salem or the United States. It's all over it's all over the world. The World Health Organization came to the same conclusion. They said that cellular towers and cellular phones do not pose any risk to humans at this time. They did have a caveat. They said this is based on relatively short-term data.
That's true.
All right? And short-term, from a biological standpoint, is 10 years. Long-term studies have not been conducted yet. Long-term, for the, I think I'm not a biologist, I'm an electrical guy, is 30, 40 years. So we haven't had cell phones like we have now for 30 or 40 years. So it's still kind of an open book about the long-term health risk posed by RF energy being emitted from these devices. But let me add to that. You're specifically asked me to look at cellular towers.
Sir.
Okay. The makeup of a cellular tower, they're normally 50 to 200 feet high. At the base of a tower is normally a building. Housed in that building is the base stations, if you want to think about that. Most of the base stations in a cellular infrastructure emit 50 watts of electromagnetic energy. The FCC limits the amount of power that these transmitters can transmit. But the engineers that build out a cellular network don't want that 50 watts of energy being at the base of that tower. They want it to be being emitted at the antennas, which are normally placed somewhere between 100 to 125 feet, maybe 200 feet. And so that's why you see, if you look at a typical cellular tower, they have the big black cables running up them. That's so the RF energy doesn't emit from it. So they want very little RF energy loss between the base station and that antenna that's located 150 feet above the ground. The other thing I think we need to understand about the engineering side of a cellular tower is that the engineers direct that RF energy coming from the antenna towards the horizon. They don't point it towards the ground. And the reason why they do that, they get a wider coverage area. So by the time the energy from that radio antenna reaches the ground, it's a very, 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 very low rate of energy. Because it's easier to receive a signal than it is to transmit. So the real risk is not the cellular tower, it's the handset.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's what the World Health Organization, they didn't even address cellular towers. All their research on long term is on the handset. So that's basically the findings that I came from the report. So, Councilman Taylor, you have any questions, sir?
Mr. Sarin, I think that was a detailed report, and I know this committee really appreciates it. You gave it to us from the local level and from the world view, and so again, it's most appreciated. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Sarin? If there are no questions, thank you again. I will take the time to put in a shameless plug. The East and the Southeast wards are pretty much, we're brothers and sisters in arms. We're having a meeting on January the 30th at 6 p.m. To hear from our community, discuss cell towers in residential neighborhoods, and that meeting will definitely give some good information on what your committee does. Councilmember Light, and again, that's January 30th at the Enterprise Center, located at 1922 Martin Luther King Drive at 6 p.m. Is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, we will consider this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was
Thank you.